The doorbell rang at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember the exact time because I was standing at my kitchen counter, watching the coffee maker drip its slow, dark rhythm, and the clock on the microwave seemed unnaturally bright in the pre-dawn dimness. I wasn't expecting anyone. At 63 years old, living alone in a 3-bedroom ranch house in suburban Ohio, unexpected visitors were either salespeople or trouble. I shuffled to the door in my bathrobe and slippers, my knees protesting each step with their familiar morning ache. Through the frosted glass panel, I could see small shapes huddled on my front porch. My heart did something strange then, a little skip that sent a flutter through my chest. I opened the door. 4 children stood there like a photograph from the Depression era. The oldest, a girl who couldn't have been more than 12, held a baby on her hip. 2 boys, maybe 7 and 9, flanked her on either side, their hands clutching worn backpacks. They all had my son's eyes, that particular shade of hazel that turns gold in certain light. "Grandma," the girl said, her voice small and uncertain. Behind them, Marcus's beat-up Honda was already backing out of my driveway. I caught a glimpse of his profile through the driver's side window, jaw set, eyes forward, not looking back. Not even once. The car turned onto Maple Street and disappeared around the corner, carrying my only son away from the wreckage he'd just created. "Come inside," I heard myself say, though my brain was still trying to process what was happening. "It's cold out here." They filed past me silently, a parade of small, frightened people who smelled like fast food and unwashed hair. The girl, she told me her name was Iris, set the baby down on my living room carpet with the practiced care of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. The baby, maybe 18 months old, immediately started crying. Not the demanding wail of a spoiled child, but the exhausted sob of someone who'd cried too much already. "His name is Camden," Iris said, kneeling beside him. "He's hungry." The 2 boys stood frozen by the door, their backpacks still on, as if they might need to run at any moment. The older one had a split lip, recent but healing. The younger one was missing a front tooth, and his Star Wars t-shirt had a stain across the chest that might have been ketchup or might have been blood. I couldn't tell which. "What about you 2? I asked, keeping my voice gentle. "What are your names?" The older boy looked at his sister, waiting for permission. She gave a small nod. "I'm Holden," he said. "This is Finn." Finn didn't speak. He just stared at me with those enormous hazel eyes, and I saw something in them that made my stomach turn over, a blankness, a shutting down. The look of a child who'd learned that the world was not safe and adults could not be trusted. I'd last seen Marcus 6 months ago, at Christmas. He'd shown up alone, without his wife, without these children I didn't even know existed. He'd stayed for dinner, eaten 3 helpings of ham, deflected all my questions about his life, and left before dessert. Before that, it had been a year. And before that, 2 years. Our relationship had become a series of widening gaps, silences that grew longer and more difficult to bridge. I'd known he was married. He'd told me about Stephanie briefly, casually, as if mentioning a new coffee shop he'd tried. No wedding invitation, no announcement. Just, "Yeah, Mom, I got married. It's not a big deal." I'd learned to accept these breadcrumbs of information, these scraps of my son's life that he doled out when he remembered I existed. But children? 4 children? And he'd never mentioned them. Not once. I made pancakes because I didn't know what else to do. Pancakes from a box mix, with maple syrup that was probably too old, butter that had been in my refrigerator since January. The kids ate like wolves, hunched over their plates, barely chewing. Iris fed Camden carefully, blowing on each bite, whispering encouragements. She was 12, I learned. Holden was 8. Finn had just turned 6. Camden was 19 months. "Where's your mother?" I asked when they'd finished eating, when they looked slightly less like refugees and slightly more like real children. Iris's face closed up like a door slamming. "Gone." "Gone where?" "Just gone," she said, and something in her voice told me not to push. Not yet. Not until I'd earned the right to ask these questions. I set them up in the spare bedrooms. The ones that had been empty since Marcus moved out 25 years ago. The ones I'd gradually filled with craft supplies and old furniture and boxes of memories I couldn't bring myself to throw away. I found sheets that didn't match, pillows that had gone flat, blankets that smelled like mothballs. Iris and Camden took the room that used to be Marcus's. Holden and Finn took the one that had been a guest room. Back when I used to have guests, they fell asleep almost instantly. All four of them, as if sleep were a debt they'd been accumulating for weeks. I stood in each doorway, watching their small chests rise and fall, and felt something crack open inside me, some combination of love and rage and terror that I couldn't quite name. Then I went to the kitchen and called Marcus's phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called again, and again, and again, 12 times. Each time, the cheerful automated voice told me that the person I was trying to reach was unavailable. On the 13th try, I left a message. Marcus Benjamin Crawford. I said, using his full name the way I had when he was a boy and had done something unforgivable. You call me back right now. Right now. Whatever is happening, whatever you're going through, you do not abandon your children. You do not leave them on someone's doorstep like unwanted packages. You call me. Today. He didn't call. The first week was chaos. I hadn't raised small children in decades, and I'd forgotten, or maybe I'd never fully understood how much space they take up, how much noise, how much constant vigilance. Camden needed diapers and formula. Finn wet the bed every night. Holden got into fights at the elementary school I hurriedly enrolled them in. Iris refused to go to middle school at all, said she needed to stay home and take care of her brothers, and no amount of reasoning could convince her otherwise. I learned their routine slowly, painfully. Camden liked his bottle warm but not hot. Finn would only eat chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs. Holden couldn't sleep without a nightlight. Iris cut her own hair in the bathroom one night, hacking it off in uneven chunks, and when I asked her why, she said, because he used to pull it. He, not Dad. Not Marcus. Just he, my neighbor. Donna, who'd lived 3 houses down for 15 years, came over on day 4 with a casserole and thinly veiled curiosity. I didn't know you had grandchildren, she said, peering past me into the living room where Holden and Finn were building something elaborate with blocks. Neither did I said, which was the truth, though it sounded like a joke. She laughed uncomfortably. How long are they staying? I don't know. That was the truth too. I'd tried calling Marcus 47 times and for days. I'd called the last phone number I had for Stephanie. I'd even tried calling Marcus's friend Brian, who I'd met once at a barbecue 6 years ago. Nothing. It was as if my son had evaporated, had stepped through a door into another dimension where phones didn't work and responsibilities didn't exist. I reported it to the police on day 5. A tired-looking officer named Rodriguez came to my house, took notes, asked questions I couldn't answer. Has he done this before? No. Any history of drug use? Not that I know of. Mental health issues? I don't know. That was the hardest part. Sitting across from this stranger and realizing how little I knew about my own son. How thoroughly we'd failed to stay connected. How the distance between us had grown so vast that he'd become a mystery to me. We'll file a missing persons report, Rodriguez said. But I have to be honest with you, ma'am. If he's an adult and left voluntarily, there's not much we can do. People have the right to disappear. What about his children? I asked. Don't they have rights? He looked at me with something like pity. You might want to talk to a family lawyer. Get temporary guardianship established. Otherwise, if he comes back and wants to take them, he didn't finish the sentence. But I understood. If Marcus came back, he could take them. And if he was the kind of man who would dump his children on a doorstep and vanish, what kind of life would they return to? I hired a lawyer I couldn't afford. Margaret Chen, 50-something, sharp-eyed, expensive. She sat in my living room and listened to my story while Iris eavesdropped from the hallway. Thinking I didn't notice, the good news, Margaret said, is that we can petition for temporary guardianship on the grounds of abandonment. The bad news is that it's going to take time. And it's going to be expensive. And there's no guarantee that a judge will grant it without trying to locate the parents first. What about Stephanie? I asked. The mother? Tell me what you know about her. Almost nothing. It burned to admit. They got married about 8 years ago. I met her once, at a distance. Marcus showed me a picture on his phone. That's it. Margaret made notes on her legal pad. We'll need to do a diligent search, try to find her, document that we tried. If she's truly abandoned these children too, that strengthens your case. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned more about my son's life than I had in the previous decade. Margaret hired an investigator, a woman named Rita who found things on the internet that made me feel like I was reading about a stranger. Marcus and Stephanie had been married in a Las Vegas chapel. No family present, no announcement, no celebration. They'd moved 7 times in 8 years, always one step ahead of something: evictions, debt collectors, angry landlords. Stephanie had filed for divorce 3 months ago and disappeared. The investigator found a Facebook post from January, a cryptic message. Sometimes you have to save yourself, even if it means leaving everything behind. Everything, including for children. Marcus had been fired from his last 3 jobs. There were court records, small claims, unpaid bills, eviction notice from February. The apartment where they'd been living, a rundown complex in Cincinnati, had been cleared out. The landlord said Marcus had left in the middle of the night, owing 2 months' rent. He's been unraveling, Margaret said, showing me the documents spread across my kitchen table. For a while, from the looks of it. I didn't know, I whispered. I should have known. Parents can't fix everything, she said, not unkindly. Sometimes kids grow up and make choices we can't protect them from. But he wasn't a kid. He was 41 years old. And these children, my grandchildren, had paid the price for his choices. The temporary guardianship came through 6 weeks after they arrived. A judge reviewed the evidence, appointed a guardian ad litem to interview the children, and signed the papers on a rainy Thursday in May. Iris cried when I told her. Not sad tears, I realized. Relief. Does this mean he can take us back? She asked. Not without a court fight, I said. And he'd have to show up for that. He won't, she said with certainty. He never comes back. There was a story in those words. A history I was only beginning to understand. Late at night, when the boys were asleep and Camden was finally settled, Iris would sometimes sit with me at the kitchen table. She never said much, but slowly, in fragments, I started to piece together the life they'd left behind, the apartments that smelled like cigarettes and old garbage, the weeks when there was no food except whatever the school provided, the nights when Marcus and Stephanie would scream at each other, and Iris would gather her brothers into the closet and sing to them quietly until the fighting stopped. The times Marcus would disappear for days and Iris, at 12 years old, would become the mother, changing diapers, making meals from whatever she could find, lying to concerned teachers about why her brothers looked so thin. Mom left first, Iris told me one night in June. We were sitting on the back porch, watching fireflies drift through the yard. She told me she was going to the store. She kissed Camden and said she'd be back in an hour. That was 3 months ago. Did she ever call? Once. She said she was sorry. She said she loved us, but she couldn't do it anymore. She said Dad would take care of us. Iris laughed, a sound without humor. 2 weeks later, Dad woke us up at 5 in the morning. He said we were going on a trip. He drove for 3 hours. Then he pulled up here and told us to get out. Did he say anything? He said, "Your grandma will take care of you. That's all." Then he drove away. I felt hatred then. Pure and hot and clarifying. Hatred for my son, for the man he'd become, for the weakness and selfishness that had let him destroy these innocent lives. But underneath the hatred was something more complicated, a grief for the boy he'd been, the one who'd laughed easily and drawn elaborate pictures and told me he loved me every night before bed. Where had that boy gone? At what point had he been replaced by this stranger who could abandon his children? Summer arrived like a gift. The routine we'd established in those first chaotic weeks began to feel almost normal. I'd enrolled Iris in an online school program after she'd refused to set foot in the local middle school. Holden started making friends in the neighborhood, kids who'd ride their bikes to our house and play basketball in the driveway until dark. Finn stopped wetting the bed and started talking more, his voice high and sweet when he told me about the bugs he'd found in the garden. Camden learned to walk, tottering across the living room with his arms out like a tiny tightrope walker. I was exhausted. At 63, I didn't have the energy I'd had when Marcus was small. My knees ached from chasing Camden. My back protested when I lifted him. I fell into bed each night feeling like I'd run a marathon, only to wake up at dawn when he started crying. But I was also strangely happy. The house felt alive again. There was noise and mess and constant chaos, but there was also laughter and small triumphs and moments of pure sweetness that made my heart ache. Like when Finn picked dandelions from the yard and presented them to me solemnly, as if they were roses. Or when Holden scored his first goal in soccer and ran straight to me on the sideline, his face glowing. Or when Camden fell asleep on my chest, his small body warm and trusting, his breath steady against my neck. Margaret called in August with news. "They found your son." My heart stopped. "Where?" "Phoenix. He's been living there since March apparently. Working construction under the table. He's living in a trailer park with a girlfriend. Of course. Of course he'd moved on, started fresh, erased his old life like clearing a search history." "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on what you want to do. We can notify him about the guardianship proceedings, give him a chance to contest it. Or we can proceed without notification, argue that his abandonment constitutes a voluntary relinquishment of parental rights." "What do the children want?" The guardian ad litem asked them. Iris said she doesn't want to see him. Holden said he doesn't care. Finn didn't answer. "Camden's too young to have an opinion." "Then proceed," I said. "Proceed without telling him." It felt like a betrayal. Like I was cutting the last thread that connected me to my son. But he'd cut it first, hadn't he? He'd cut it when he drove away and never looked back. The permanency hearing was scheduled for October. Margaret prepared me for what might happen, that Marcus could show up, that he could fight for custody, that a judge might give him another chance despite everything. But October came and went, and Marcus didn't appear. The judge, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the case and asked to speak to the children privately. When they came out of her chambers, Iris was holding Finn's hand tightly. "I've reviewed the evidence," the judge said. "I've spoken with the children. I've read the reports from the guardian ad litem and the social worker. And I'm granting permanent guardianship to Mrs. Crawford. Furthermore, I'm terminating the parental rights of Marcus Crawford and Stephanie Crawford on the grounds of abandonment and failure to support. This will allow for the possibility of adoption, should Mrs. Crawford choose to pursue that in the future." Just like that, they were mine. Not temporarily, not conditionally. Mine. We went out for ice cream afterward, all 5 of us crammed into my old Camry, the car seat I'd bought for Camden strapped in the back. Holden got chocolate with gummy bears. Finn got vanilla with sprinkles. Iris got nothing, said she wasn't hungry. But when I ordered a sundae with extra fudge and 2 spoons, she ate half of it. Camden got ice cream all over his face and hands and laughed like it was the best thing that had ever happened to him. That night, after I'd tucked everyone in and checked the locks and turned off the lights, I sat in my bedroom and cried. Not sad tears. Not exactly happy tears either. Something in between relief and exhaustion and grief and love all mixed together until I couldn't tell which was which. I thought about calling Marcus then, telling him what he'd lost, making him understand what he'd thrown away. But what would be the point? He knew. He had to know. And he'd chosen this anyway. The first year was survival. The second year was about learning to be a family. We had our rhythms, our inside jokes, our Friday movie nights and Sunday morning pancakes. I'd sold some stock I'd been saving for retirement and used the money to convert the garage into a proper bedroom for Iris, giving her the privacy a teenage girl needed. We painted it sage green, her choice. She hung fairy lights and put up posters of bands I didn't recognize. Holden joined the soccer team and discovered he was good at it. Fast, fearless, with an instinct for knowing where the ball would go. I stood on the sidelines at every game, rain or shine, becoming one of those grandmas who cheered too loud and brought orange slices for the whole team. Finn came out of his shell slowly, like a flower blooming in time lapse. He started talking to me about everything: the cloud formations, the names of dinosaurs, the rules of Pokémon that I could never quite understand. He made a friend named Oscar who lived 2 streets over, and they'd build elaborate structures with Legos for hours, their heads bent together in concentration. Camden grew from a baby into a toddler into a little boy with opinions and preferences and a will of iron. He loved trucks and refused to wear any shirt that wasn't blue. He called me Gamma and Iris Issy and would throw spectacular tantrums when he didn't get his way. Tantrums that exhausted me but that also felt somehow normal, like regular childhood challenges rather than symptoms of trauma. But Marcus haunted us anyway. He was there in the way Iris flinched when I raised my voice, in the way Holden hoarded snacks in his room, hiding granola bars and crackers under his bed like a squirrel preparing for winter, in the way Finn would ask casually if I was going to leave too, in the way Camden cried every time I went to the grocery store, terrified I wouldn't come back. We went to therapy, all of us. Margaret had recommended a family counselor, Dr. Sarah Winters, who specialized in trauma and abandonment. We sat in her office with its soft lighting and comfortable chairs, and she taught us how to talk about feelings, how to recognize triggers, how to build trust. Children who've been abandoned develop attachment disorders, she explained to me during one of my private sessions. They have trouble believing that anyone will stay. Every goodbye feels like abandonment. Every closed door feels like rejection. It takes years to rebuild that trust. Will they be okay? I asked. Eventually? With love and consistency and patience? Yes, they'll carry scars, but they can heal. You're giving them something profound, a second chance. I thought about that a lot. Second chances. Wasn't I getting one too? A chance to be the mother I should have been, to break the patterns that had led to Marcus becoming the man he was. Because I had to take some responsibility, didn't I? I'd raised him. Somewhere along the way, I'd failed. My own mother had been cold, distant, more concerned with appearances than with actual love. I'd sworn I wouldn't be like her. I'd tried to be warm with Marcus, affectionate, present. But I'd also been young when I had him, only 22, barely more than a child myself. His father had left when Marcus was 4, just disappeared one day like he'd been erased. And I'd raised Marcus alone, working 2 jobs, exhausted and overwhelmed and doing the best I could. Maybe my best hadn't been good enough. Maybe I'd been so focused on surviving that I'd missed something crucial, some moment when Marcus needed me and I wasn't there. Some wound that never healed. Some pain that calcified into the kind of brokenness that makes a man abandon his children. Dr. Winters told me not to blame myself. You can't control another person's choices, she said. Marcus is responsible for Marcus. You're not responsible for what he did. You're only responsible for what you do now. What I did now was show up. Every day, every morning, every night, every tantrum and triumph and mundane moment. I showed up for soccer games and school conferences and doctor's appointments. I showed up when Finn had nightmares. I showed up when Holden got in trouble for fighting at school. I showed up when Iris had her first period and was too embarrassed to tell me, but I noticed anyway and made sure she had what she needed without making it weird. The years passed. Camden started kindergarten. Finn lost teeth and gained confidence. Holden grew 4 inches in a single year and ate everything in the house. Iris turned 16 and got her driver's license and started talking about college. I was 71 now, and I felt every one of those years in my bones. My knees had gone from aching to genuinely painful. I'd had a cancer scare, a lump in my breast that turned out to be benign, but that terrified me because what would happen to the children if I died? I had no backup plan. No safety net. It was just me. I started taking better care of myself. Not for my sake, but for theirs. I walked every morning. I ate vegetables. I went to all my doctor's appointments and took my blood pressure medication religiously. I needed to stay alive. Needed to be there until they were grown, until they were safe. Marcus's name came up sometimes, but less and less as time passed. Holden mentioned him once, said he'd Googled their dad and found a Facebook profile. He looks happy, Holden said, his voice carefully neutral. He's got a new kid, a baby. My heart broke for him, for all of them. Marcus had started over, had created a new family, had become a father again to someone else. The message was clear. Those 4 children he'd left on my doorstep weren't worth coming back for. I'm sorry, I said, because what else was there to say? It's fine, Holden said, but his eyes said it wasn't fine. Would never be fine. I don't need him. I have you. That night I lay awake until thinking about karma, thinking about how the universe balances things, or doesn't, how sometimes terrible people live happy lives and good people suffer for no reason. I wanted Marcus to pay for what he'd done. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused. But wanting it didn't make it happen, and God or karma or whatever force governed the universe seemed disinclined to punish him until the phone call came. It was a Saturday in November, 7 years after Marcus had dropped the children off. I was in the kitchen making dinner pot roast, because Camden loved it when my phone rang. An Arizona number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Crawford? A woman's voice, official and professional. Yes? This is Phoenix Memorial Hospital. I'm calling about Marcus Crawford. Our records show you as his emergency contact. My blood went cold. What happened? Mr. Crawford was in a serious car accident. He's in critical condition. I think you should come. I stood there holding the phone, pot roast forgotten, my hands shaking. Part of me wanted to hang up. Part of me wanted to say, he made his choices. He abandoned his children. I'm not coming. But the part of me that was still his mother, despite everything, couldn't do that. I'll be there, I heard myself say. I drove through the night, left the kids with Donna, who'd become more than a neighbor in these years, who'd become family. I drove 14 hours, stopping only for gas and bad coffee, my mind running in circles. What would I say to him? Would he even be conscious? Would he want to see me? Phoenix Memorial was a massive complex of buildings, cold and fluorescent and smelling like disinfectant. The ICU nurse led me to his room, warned me that he was sedated, that he looked worse than he was, that he had a long recovery ahead but would likely survive. He looked like death. That was the first thing I thought. Tubes and wires everywhere, machines beeping, his face swollen and bruised beyond recognition. But it was him, my son, the boy I'd raised, the man who'd destroyed so much. I sat by his bed and waited. He woke up 3 days later. I'd stayed the entire time, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair, eating vending machine food, waiting. His eyes opened slowly, confused, then focused on my face. Mom. His voice was rough, damaged. I'm here. What? What happened? Car accident. You were hit by a drunk driver. You've been unconscious for 3 days. He absorbed this slowly. Am I going to die? No, the doctors say you'll recover. He closed his eyes. For a long moment, I thought he'd fallen back asleep. Then he spoke, so quietly I almost missed it. I'm sorry. 2 words. 7 years late. 2 words that couldn't begin to cover the damage, couldn't undo the trauma, couldn't give those children back the father they deserved. Sorry for what? I asked. I needed to hear him say it. For everything. For leaving them. For being a coward. For failing. Why, Marcus? Why did you do it? He was crying now, tears sliding down his bruised face. I didn't know how to be a father. I was drowning. Everything was falling apart. Stephanie left, and I couldn't handle it alone. Couldn't feed them. Couldn't pay rent. Couldn't do anything right. I thought you could give them a better life. You could have asked for help. You could have called me. We could have figured it out together. I was ashamed, he whispered. I was so ashamed of what I'd become, of what a failure I was. I couldn't face you, couldn't face them. So I ran. The nurse came in then, checked his vitals, gave him more pain medication. He drifted off again, and I sat there watching him, feeling something shift inside me. The rage I'd carried for 7 years was still there, but it was accompanied by something else now. Pity, maybe, or grief for the life he could have had, the father he could have been. He stabilized over the next week. Broken ribs, fractured pelvis, traumatic brain injury that would require months of rehabilitation. No insurance, of course. Mountains of medical debt he'd never be able to pay. The other driver died. A police officer told me during one of my visits. Drunk. Ran a red light. Hit your son head on. The drunk driver's family is asking if you'll consider not pressing civil charges. They're devastated. I thought about karma then. About how the drunk driver had paid the ultimate price while my son survived. About how justice was never clean or fair. How punishment didn't erase harm. How the universe's balance sheet was more complicated than simple eye for an eye mathematics. I won't press charges, I said. Tell them I forgive them. When Marcus was conscious and coherent, I told him about the children, about Holden's soccer trophies, about Finn's love of science, about Camden's obsession with trucks, about Iris, who was 17 now, who wanted to study psychology, who had survived everything and was becoming someone remarkable despite it all. They hate me, he said. It wasn't a question. They don't hate you, I said. They don't think about you much anymore. They've moved on. That seemed to hurt him more than hate would have. Do you want to see them? I asked. I had to ask. I didn't want to, but I had to give him the chance. He was quiet for a long time. Then, no, not like this. Not when I can't. When I don't have anything to offer them. When I'm still broken. You might always be broken, Marcus. Then maybe they're better off without me. I flew home 2 weeks later, when Marcus was stable enough to be moved to a rehabilitation facility. We didn't say goodbye exactly. I told him I'd pray for him. He told me to take care of his children. As if I hadn't been doing exactly that for 7 years, the kids asked where I'd been. I'd told Donna to tell them I had to help an old friend, which was technically true in the most twisted possible way. Everything okay? Iris asked, watching my face carefully. Everything's fine, I said. I'm just glad to be home. But she knew. Of course she knew. She was 17 and sharp and had learned to read people's faces the way some kids learn to read books. Was it him? She asked later, when the boys were asleep. I could have lied, but I'd promised myself I'd always be honest with her, even when the truth was hard. Yes. Is he dead? No, she nodded slowly, processing this. Good, good. I don't want him dead. I'm not that angry anymore. I just don't want him in our lives. He won't be, I said. He doesn't want to see you. Any of you. Good, she said again, and then, softer. Did he ask about us? Yes, he asked how you were doing. I told him you were doing great. Did you tell him I'm going to college next year? I did. Did he care? I thought about Marcus's face when I told him about their lives, about the way his eyes had filled with tears, about the genuine grief I'd seen there. But grief wasn't enough. Was it? Caring wasn't enough. Love wasn't enough when it came 7 years too late. I think so, I said, but it doesn't matter. She hugged me then, my almost adult granddaughter, this fierce survivor who had raised her brothers when she was 12 years old, who had every right to be broken but had chosen to be strong instead. I love you, Grandma, she said. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. Marcus called 3 months later. I almost didn't answer when I saw the Arizona number, but curiosity won out. Mom. His voice was stronger now, clearer. I wanted you to know I'm out of rehab. I'm doing better. That's good, Marcus. I'm going to therapy, trying to figure out why I am the way I am, trying to be better. That's good, I said again, because what else was there to say? I've been thinking about the kids, about trying to make amends somehow. Maybe writing them letters? Or sending child support? I got a job at a warehouse. It doesn't pay much, but I could send something. No, I said. Firm and final. No, they don't need your letters. They don't need your money. They don't need anything from you. They have what they need. They have me. I'm their father. Biology doesn't make you a father, Marcus. Being there makes you a father. And you weren't there. You chose not to be there. I was sick. I was broken. I didn't know how I know. And I'm glad you're getting help. I'm glad you're trying to be better. But you don't get to come back into their lives now, when it's convenient for you, when you're feeling guilty. They've healed. They're happy. And I won't let you disrupt that. He was crying. I could hear it in his breathing. I lost them, didn't I? I lost them forever. Yes, I said. Not cruelly, but honestly. You did. Mom, I have to go, Marcus. Take care of yourself. I hung up before he could say anything else. Before I could waver. Before the part of me that was still his mother could overrule the part of me that was their grandmother, their guardian, their protector. He called twice more over the next year. I didn't answer. He sent a card on Iris's 18th birthday. I threw it away without opening it. He sent money once. A check for $500. I tore it up. Some wounds don't heal. Some betrayals don't get forgiven. Some doors once closed should stay closed. Iris graduated high school with honors. She gave a speech at graduation about resilience and second chances and the meaning of family. She talked about her grandmother who took in 4 children and loved them when no one else would. She didn't mention her father, not once. Holden made varsity soccer as a sophomore. Finn discovered a talent for music and started playing guitar. Camden lost his obsession with trucks and gained an obsession with space. They were growing up, becoming themselves, building lives that had nothing to do with Marcus Crawford. And I was aging, 73 now, moving slower, forgetting more. My doctor had concerns about my heart. Nothing serious yet, but warnings, recommendations, medications, the inevitable decline that comes for all of us if we live long enough. I started making plans, not dramatic ones, but practical ones. I updated my will. I made sure Iris knew where all the important documents were. I started teaching her how to manage the household finances, how to handle the bills, how to cook the meals the boys liked. "Why are you telling me all this?" she asked one day. "Because you're 18 now. Because you should know these things. You're not dying, are you?" "Not today," I said. "But someday. And I want to make sure you're all taken care of," she cried then. And I held her like I'd held her brothers, like I'd held them all through nightmares and disappointments and ordinary moments of sadness. Because that's what love is. Not the dramatic gestures, not the grand declarations, but the showing up, the holding on, the staying even when it's hard. Marcus sent one more card. 3 years after that last phone call. It arrived on a Tuesday in March, exactly 10 years after he dropped the children off. Inside was a single sentence in his handwriting. "I hope you can forgive me someday." I read it once, then put it in a drawer with all the other documents from that time, the guardianship papers, the termination of parental rights, the adoption papers I'd eventually filed when the kids asked me to, when they wanted it to be official, permanent, real. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Forgiveness wasn't something I could give him. Wasn't something he'd earned. Maybe someday, years from now, when all 4 of them were grown and stable and living their own lives, they might choose to reach out to him, to seek their own closure or understanding. That would be their choice. But it wouldn't be today. Maybe not ever. On a warm evening in May, 10 years and 2 months after they'd arrived, we had a party. Nothing fancy, just pizza and cake and the 5 of us sitting around the kitchen table, laughing about something stupid Camden had done at school. Iris was home from college for the weekend. Holden was talking about soccer scholarships. Finn was teaching himself to play Blackbird on his guitar. Camden was covered in frosting. I thought. This is what it was all for. Not the dramatic moments, not the crisis or the rescue or the revenge. Just this ordinary love, ordinary life, ordinary happiness built from the ruins of something that should have destroyed us all. Marcus got his karma, in the end. Not in the form of punishment or justice or cosmic revenge, but in the form of absence. He'd lost his children. He'd lost the chance to know these remarkable people they were becoming. He'd lost birthday parties and graduations and soccer games and quiet evenings around the table. He'd lost everything that mattered, and no amount of apology or regret could give it back. And me? I'd gained a second chance. A chance to love better, to show up fully, to build something beautiful from something broken. I'd gained 4 reasons to wake up every morning. 4 hearts to care for 4 futures to help build. Was it easy? No. Was it fair that I had to do this at 73 instead of relaxing into retirement? No. Would I change it if I could? Not for anything in the world. That's the thing about karma. It's not always obvious. It's not always immediate. Sometimes it's subtle and complicated and manifests in ways you'd never expect. Marcus's karma wasn't the car accident or the medical debt or the chronic pain he'd live with forever. His karma was missing out on all of this. Missing out on being loved by these 4 incredible humans who'd learned to thrive without him. And my karma was getting to love them back. As I looked around the table that evening, watching them laugh and argue and steal food from each other's plates, I realized something profound. We were whole. Not despite what Marcus had done, but somehow, mysteriously, because of it. His greatest act of destruction had become through some strange alchemy of love and time and resilience, their salvation, and mine too. The doorbell that rang 10 years ago had opened a door I didn't know I needed. It had given me a purpose, a reason, a family when I thought my family was broken beyond repair. It had let me rewrite the ending of my story, to become the grandmother, the mother I'd always wanted to be. So when people ask me about Marcus, about my son who abandoned his children, I tell them the truth. He broke something that couldn't be fixed. But from those broken pieces, we built something new, something stronger, something real. And that's not just karma, that's grace.